having been called a murder in slow motion. In this video, we'll be looking at the shocking case of the stalking and murder of podcaster Zoreh Sadeghi and her husband Mohammad Milad Naseri. So, hit those lights and sit back as we take a look at the tragic circumstances that led up to the killing of Zoreh and her husband. Stalking. The Paladin website for stalking awareness describes stalking as a pattern of unwanted, fixated, and obsessive behavior which is intrusive and causes fear and violence or serious alarm or disaster. Actors and recording artists have fans. It's necessary for their success. Without their admirers, who would go and see their movies or download their albums? Some of those fans are happy enough to admire their idols from afar, going to see them at the cinema or attending a concert. Others take it a step further and reach out to their heroes by writing to them, posting messages on social media, and even sending gifts. Sometimes things can get a little weird. Avril Lavigne received a dead rabbit from a fan when she was in Japan, and Jared Leto was once gifted a human ear. And sometimes things turn even darker. The price of fame. The fantasy for a celebrity stalker is that they are actually in a personal relationship with their idol. In 1989, the actor Rebecca Schaffer was shot dead in West Hollywood by her stalker. The man, named Robert Bardo, became obsessed with her after she answered one of his many fan letters. He paid a detective agency $250 to obtain Rebecca's address in Los Angeles, before knocking on her door and shooting her at point-blank range in the chest. Bardo was given a lifetime sentence. The case was a watershed moment in that it helped to usher in America's first anti-stalking laws in 1990. Probably the most famous instance of celebrity stalking is the case of John Mark Chapman, who shot and killed former Beatles member John Lennon outside of the musician's New York apartment in 1980. Chapman made no attempt to flee the scene and was found reading a copy of The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger when police officers arrested him. Coincidentally, Robert Bardo also carried a paperback copy of the book when he murdered Rebecca Schaffer. Chapman later stated that he had received letters from Bardo while in prison before he shot Rebecca. Rather than murdering the woman he was stalking, John Hinckley Jr. set out to impress her instead by killing the President of the United States. And he very nearly succeeded. Hinckley became obsessed with actor Jodie Foster after seeing the 1976 film Taxi Driver. In it, the protagonist of the movie, Travis Bickle, played by Robert De Niro, plots to assassinate a presidential candidate. At first, Hinckley bombarded Jodie with love letters, poems, and messages, but was unable to get her attention. So he started to fantasize about killing himself or hijacking a plane to impress her. He even moved to New Haven, Connecticut, to be near her when she attended Yale University. Eventually, Hinckley decided to assassinate the president to attract Jodie's attention. After following President Jimmy Carter around and having his guns confiscated while trying to board a plane, Hinckley bought more firearms and moved his focus on to the newly elected President Ronald Reagan in 1981. Before the attempt on Reagan's life, Hinckley wrote Jodie a letter. He complained to her that after all his efforts, she still could not develop an interest in him, and that he never had the nerve to simply approach her and introduce himself. He continued, "The reason I'm going ahead with this attempt now is because I cannot wait any longer to impress you." Then he waited outside the Hilton Hotel in Washington, D.C. with a revolver before shooting all 6 bullets at the president. He murdered Press Secretary James Brady, wounded a police officer and a Secret Service agent, and seriously wounded President Reagan. Hinckley was tried and found not guilty by reason of insanity and institutionalized at a psychiatric hospital. He was finally released in 2022. Reagan arrived at hospital right on the margin of death, but recovered quickly from a punctured lung, a broken rib, and internal bleeding. Just after his trial, Hinckley wrote about the shooting, describing the act as the greatest love offering in the history of the world. Hunting. It was this same level of unwanted, obsessive behavior that led to the deaths of Zoreh and her husband, Mohammad. With the growth of the internet, social media stars have become celebrities in their own right, making some podcasters, YouTubers, and TikTokers vulnerable to online abuse. Putting themselves out there means attracting attention. Most of it is wanted, but some not so much. Zoreh Sadeghi was a successful podcaster. Streaming in her native Farsi, she helped others find jobs in the US tech industry by sharing her experience as a newcomer to the country. After working as a software engineer and researcher in Iran, Zoreh studied at the University of Washington, Tacoma on a graduate and PhD program. Her husband Mohammad, who had previously worked for Google in Kirkland and CDK Global, was now a software engineer at Amazon, joining the company in January of 2022. He was born in Iran and attended the Sharif University of Technology before the couple moved to the US. They married and purchased their home in Redmond, King County, Washington in 2021, where they lived with Zoreh's mother. In the summer of 2022, Zoreh first had contact with 38-year-old Ramin Kodak Karamrezai. He too was an immigrant from Iran and one of her listeners on the Clubhouse app. Clubhouse isn't like a traditional podcast. Instead, it's a live stream video where several people might discuss a topic of interest. You can ask questions and engage in the conversation immediately, rather than listening first and using the comment section afterwards. Zoreh and Ramin became friends. Ramin quickly became infatuated with Zoreh, who was flattered at first. Still, things took a sinister turn when Ramin became obsessed with the podcaster and began harassing her. He would call her constantly from different numbers and send unwanted gifts. Zoreh first alerted the police in December, after things escalated when her stalker became possessive and turned up at her home with a gift of flowers while her husband was away. Ramin was even able to obtain the phone numbers of Zoreh's family and friends and continued to send her gifts, even after police warnings. At one point, he rang her more than 100 times in a single day and left her husband Mohammad more than 20 voicemails. The stalker would cry and beg for Zoreh to pick him up, telling her that he would tie himself to her favourite tree in her garden and set himself on fire in an act of self-immolation so that the tree would also burn and set her house alight in the process. When Zoreh blocked his number and access to her social media accounts, Ramin used different numbers and fake accounts to continue his regime of mental abuse. He sent 82 messages through one app. He told her to either make her Instagram account public so he could see what she was posting, or delete it. Somehow, Ramin always managed to find out the couple's new contact information, no matter what they did. and he would call them from different hotels where he stayed in Redmond. In her police report, Zoreh said that her stalker had bursts of anger and is completely delusional. These delusions make me fear for my life and the lives of my loved ones. She went on, all of this has caused me great distress and pain, and now I am suffering from a deep-seated fear for my safety. It has taken a toll on my recovery. After surgery, Zoreh had major back surgery and needed constant care, which was a huge problem considering how the stalker had ignored all the warnings to cease contact. Her injury meant that she was particularly vulnerable and unable to respond quickly in a crisis, so she wouldn't be able to run away and escape if the need arose. She continued, I haven't been able to open the curtains in my bedroom out of fear of him being outside, watching me. And she was sure that he wouldn't stop until he killed himself or died. Zoreh became so afraid, she filed a restraining order against Ramin. The order was supposed to last for 99 years because there was no indication that he would stop his frightening and dangerous behavior after 1 year. In the protection order, Zoreh wrote that her stalker was delusional and that his delusions made her feel for her life and the lives of her loved ones. Killing. Finally, after 18 long months of persistently obsessive behavior and fear-inducing threats, the whole thing ended in violence and tragedy. The police were called in the early hours of Friday, March the 10th, 2023, at around 1:45 a.m. because Ramin had broken through a window into Zoreh's home on 89th Street. It was Zoreh's mother who first tackled the intruder, and after fighting him off, she was able to run to the safety of a neighbour's house and call 911. Mohammed was standing in the front doorway of the house when officers arrived, but he had already been shot and collapsed. Although he was given CPR, it was impossible to resuscitate him. He had been shot in the chest. Zoreh was found dead in the master bedroom along with Ramin. She too had been shot by the stalker, who had then turned the gun on himself and was also dead. Zoreh was just 33 when she died. Her husband was 35. A protection order was filed a week before the incident, but Police Chief Lowe, who was in charge of the investigation, said the order couldn't be served because the police couldn't find Ramin, as he was a long-haul truck driver who was working away and his whereabouts were unknown. In February, just before the tragic incident, Ramin had left Zoreh 2 voice messages that were vulgar, angry, and threatening. When a stalker reaches the point where they don't respect their own life, there is a serious risk that they are thinking about homicide and suicide. The fact that Ramin was watching Zoreh's every move and turning up in person showed just how dangerous he was. His obsession had escalated from detached online threats and phone calls to physically hunting out Zoreh and killing not just her, but the man that she loved and himself. Chief Lowe said that despite Zoreh having done everything right by taking out a protection order, it was impossible to stop someone who is intent on causing harm. He continued, I do not want to create a false sense of security. Just because a restraining order is obtained, that this is some type of shield. This is an incredibly sad situation and the worst possible outcome of a stalking case. It's sad that people who put themselves out into the public domain for whatever reason leave themselves wide open to such harassment. After all, Zoreh was only trying to help people and make a difference in their lives. But Jack Levin, professor of criminology from the Northeastern University in Boston, noted that any small bit of sympathy, no matter how faint, can inspire a stalker. And stalking can happen to anyone. As the Paladin website for stalking awareness states, anyone can be a stalker. Anyone can be stalked. And stalking is not a problem that just celebrities have to deal with. The organisation Safe Horizon tells us that approximately 7.5 million people are stalked every year.